welcome to part 2 of the lesson on the Cold War. Now, this is where we ended last time, just looking into the nuclear race. In the previous part, we talked a lot about the tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States, or Warsaw Pact and NATO. We also talked about kind of the ideologies behind it, like the viewpoint of the Soviets versus the viewpoint of the West, or America and Europe, Western Europe, I should say. This idea of like a world based off of capitalism, limited government, and individual personal freedoms, versus a world where it's like no individual freedom, total control of the government to ensure the safety and fairness of all type thing. So, anyways, we talked a little bit about that last time, but you'll be seeing those things kind of crop up in these next lessons as well. But this part is we're going to be focusing mostly on this idea of the nuclear race going into the space race. So, this starts really at the end of World War II. I know it says 1949 at the top, just ignore that for a second. But at the end of World War II, you have what's called the Manhattan Project in the United States, where the United States develops the nuclear bomb, the A-bomb, the atom bomb, the ability to split the atom. The guy that led that is a guy named Oppenheimer, if you've ever heard of him before. I know everybody thinks it's Einstein. Einstein, yes, came up with a lot of the theories and science that led into it, but the guy that actually developed the first nuclear weapon is a guy named Oppenheimer. And we use it to end World War II. Now, that's a whole thing to talk about. Was the A-bomb necessary or not? It's a big argument today. But at the time, it was seen as very, very necessary. Like we have to do this type of thing, especially in the mindset of President Truman, to end the war in the best way possible. It seems like a bad thing to say today, but that is the viewpoint, and still held by most of the world today, that dropping the atomic bomb in a practical sense was the better thing to do on those two Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Even on holy cow, the destruction was, well, it shocked the world, but it did shock the world into ending World War II, like, for good. It's just done. The thing is out of World War II, though, the United States comes out as the only nuclear nation. And everybody else realizes, oh crap, if it really comes down to it, the U.S. could really get their way if they want to, because they have nukes behind them. So the Soviet Union realized this is the biggest threat to their existence. Like, if something were to come down, if a World War III were going to be starting up between them and the West, and in many cases Joseph Stalin was thinking it might, he basically was like, we need this. So they stole the plans for the nuclear bomb from us. Now, they were working on it, not to say that all the work was stolen, but there are some key features. If you guys have ever seen like documentaries on this and the history on this, it's really crazy just how this all went down. But the Soviets stole the secrets of nuclear technology from us, at least enough to where they could get their own going. And that picture you see there is one of the first atomic bombs that the Soviets test successfully, and they become a nuclear nation, which then also scares the world. Now both sides of this Cold War have nuclear technology. And this starts off this idea of what's called MAD, or mutually assured destruction. The term I use in this slide there is deterring. This idea that, you know what, you guys won't bomb us because we can bomb you. The thing though is that the United States still had an advantage there. Yes, the Soviet Union could nuke places like West Germany, even as far as Great Britain, but they weren't going to nuke the United States. Well, I guess they could get to Alaska. That would suck. But they couldn't get to the lower 48 states. So we felt more safe on that side. Like, if it really did come down to nuclear war, we could get them. We'd win that one overall. They'd be the more devastated one, and we'd still come out on top. So we felt like we had a bit of an upper hand there when we negotiated with the Soviet Union on the side of that, like, who had the better advantage. But they knew it as well. By the way, I'm showing this to go along with that idea of MAD, M-A-D, mutual assured destruction. Just a funny cartoon to kind of that represents the whole idea that they have huge weapons, but they don't want to use it just because it's the end of the world if you do. But to get into it a little bit, I actually didn't mean to keep this one in here. This is an American test of an atomic bomb, but this is the one I wanted to get to. The Soviets up the game a little bit, with the world's first H-bomb, or hydrogen bomb. I can't remember how many times bigger this is than the atom bomb. It is a lot bigger, a heck of a lot bigger, a lot more destructive than the normal atom bomb that was dropped in World War II. Basically, There's an atom bomb. Maybe that's why I'm showing the picture. H-bomb. This is a Soviet picture. It used to be top secret. Kind of cool that we can view this now. But huge. So the United States had to keep up with that. The Soviet Union now is kind of one-upping the United States here. Like, we got a bigger bomb than you. So we developed our own bomb. That's one of our H-bombs that we developed. I don't know where that's being tested. I think it's somewhere in like Utah, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, in those states. That's where they do a lot of testing. Then we decided, hey, do nukes work in water? So we got a bunch of old World War II boats. Nobody's on those boats, by the way. So we get a bunch of World War II boats. We blow the fleet up. And the end conclusion is, yes, nukes can take out a navy. So this is where this is from the United States, we develop our biggest hydrogen bomb. And this one was so big and so destructive, we scared ourselves. We're like, we don't need them any bigger. Like, this thing can take out, it isn't just taking out cities at this point. You're taking out entire counties and regions with a bomb this big. But the Soviets didn't want to stop where they're at. They had to one-up us, and they come up with what's called the Tsar bomb. So I've read, again, I'm no nuclear physicist or chemist or anything like that. So I've read, though, this one Tsar bomb could pretty much take out the entire state of Rhode Island. Yes, it's the smallest state in the United States, but it's still a lot for one bomb, just one bomb to take out. We're not just talking about taking out, say, a city like Providence, Rhode Island. We're talking about taking out the entire state. And at that point, maybe the Soviets scared themselves as well. At least they didn't build anything bigger, at least that we know of. But both of us started making lots of them, saying, hey, we can take out this. And this is where you started getting the saying of, there's so many nukes out there that we could, destroy the world 10 times over type thing. If that was really true, well, we'll never really know unless it were to happen, and we hope to never really find that out. So, but where the Soviets really get ahead of the United States is when they start developing what are called ICBMs, or intercontinental ballistic missiles. Basically the tip of that missile is the nuclear warhead. The rest of it, the rocket, is just a delivery method. But they come up with a way to be able to send a rocket that is launched from the Soviet Union anywhere in the world. If they want to nuke New York, now they can. If they want to nuke Salt Lake City, now they can. If they want to nuke Phoenix, now they can. If they wanted to nuke the southern end of Chile, now they can. This is what really just scared everybody so much, is that now nowhere was safe with these ICBMs. And of course the United States had to develop this as well. Like, we can't, we're delivering our nukes by bombers. Anywhere our bombers can't get to is safe from us, which is like the really central area of Russia. We did have bombers that could get that far. The Soviets just didn't know that at the time. So we did have bombers that could get everywhere in the Soviet Union, but this is just scary. It just seems like it was unstoppable. At least you could shoot down a bomber if you had enough, anti-air weaponry to do so. But taking down one of these, that's a whole different game. So now both sides start building these rockets, and now it seems like everything is evens. The geography of the world, which area of the world, isn't as big of a deal now because anybody can hit anywhere. The thing is this inadvertently started the space race. In order to get those rockets anywhere in the world, the Soviets actually developed a way to get into outer space and come back in. So the logical thought process is, if we could get a rocket up there, a nuclear warhead up there, why can't we get a person up there? All of a sudden they just realized space exploration has started basically on the idea of how do we destroy the world, which is kind of odd. And almost pretty much everything we have today and what we call the modern world today and our technologically advanced world today came from this. It's come from this understanding of space and our place in it. So the first satellite ever launched into space is what's called Sputnik. Although ironically, this is in the United States Smithsonian, the museum in Washington, D.C. Sputnik, the actual Sputnik is there. Interesting fun fact for you. But this is the first satellite ever sent, and the Soviet Union is the one that did it. If you're following along right now, if you kind of notice, the Soviet Union is the ones that have been one-upping the United States many times in a row now, and we've been playing catch-up this whole point. This is basically through the 1950s. the Soviet Union is also the first one to send up a life form into space that survived, a dog named Laika, as well as the first human being. I'm just forgetting. Yuri Gagarovich, I believe, the first human being ever into space. Cosmonaut. Not, Soviet Union calls their guys cosmonauts. We, United States calls our guys astronauts. Same thing. Just from different countries. Here's a picture of Laika, the one that survived. Again, I know it's a bit of time, but just to tell the story of this, I'm summarizing this as far as I understand it. But, this is how they learned things like cabin pressure and weightlessness. It was with the Laikas, multiple Laikas. The first Laika to go up into space, as far as I understand, exploded from pressure. So they learned that, maybe we need to have a pressurized cabin so that force doesn't just squish people. Then they got the idea of the weightlessness. Starvation. They sent a dog up there and it couldn't eat because the food was right in front of it, floating, but there was no air for the dog to swim over to it. Anyways, this is the stories I've heard told. They make me laugh a bit. I kind of wonder how correct they are, but these are the stories I've heard many times. So maybe you can look it up on your own. We'll find that the last Laika is able to go up and come back, and once the Laika makes it, then they decide to send up Yuri Gagarovich, and he is able to come up and come back, the first man into space ever, and the Soviet Union is the one that did it. That's when President John F. Kennedy in the early 60s said, okay, we can't play this catch up anymore. We need to do something to one-up the Soviet Union. This is when he makes the promise, by the end of the decade of the 1960s, the United States will put a man on the moon. And it'll do it through, the United States way of doing things, through the private industry and capitalistic innovation and stuff like that. And this, everybody got into this pretty good. Hey, we've had a lot of movies come out on this recently. And it's fun stuff to go into. Yeah, a lot of the effort that people put into this. And we do it in 1969. We put a man on the moon. You got the footprint there. So you could say we one-upped them there. And then from that point on, the United States kept one-upping the Soviet Union all the way into the 1980s. So just more pictures of it. By the way, yes, I've heard all the conspiracy theories about did we really put a man on the moon in 1969. Anyways, I'm not getting into that. Officially, yes, we did. So this leads into the whole idea of satellites. And, initially these satellites up there because it's a way of spying on the other side, seeing what they're doing, taking pictures of stuff and things like that with high-tech cameras that everybody, I want to say everybody, both sides, the United States and Soviet Union, is like, we don't have anything that have that capability. But yes, they did. Anyways. But that leads into the world we have today. Like, this is just showing tons. It's the best picture I could come up with. There's probably better ones out there. But now there's so many satellites up there. And they're used more for the idea of communication, for the idea of making the world more of a closer place, I guess you could say, to understand it better. This is, satellite TV, the internet, stuff like that. This is all, none of it would have been possible without the initial space race. The world we have today, cell phones, stuff like this, stuff that we consider to be normal, wouldn't be there today without this push into the space race by the nuclear race. So, anyways, I'm going to end this lesson there, where we're just focusing on the nuclear race into the space race and how that's developed the world today from the Cold War. The last lesson next time will be on hotspots of the Cold War and the end of the Cold War. So I will see you in the next lesson.